The silence before the storm set was quieter than usual that morning. Lights flickered on, cables snaked across the floor, and people moved around with half-finished coffees and sleepy eyes. It was the kind of morning where things felt just a little heavier, as if the air itself carried a weight no one could name. Keanu Reeves had arrived early, as always. He nodded politely to the crew, helped an intern carry a stack of equipment cases, and then disappeared into the corner of the set where he liked to review the script. But today, something caught his attention before he could sit down. Or rather, someone, Ana de Armas, sat by herself on the edge of the main stage platform. She wasn't looking at her phone or talking to anyone. Her hands were clenched in her lap. Her eyes, usually bright and expressive, stared at a spot on the floor like it had spoken something terrible to her. Keanu watched her for a few moments from afar. It wasn't like her to be so still. She was known for her warmth, her spark. Even when she wasn't smiling, her presence filled the room. But today, she was a shadow of that presence. He walked over slowly, careful not to startle her. As he approached, he noticed the subtle tremble in her fingers and the tension in her shoulders. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, but she wasn't saying a word. "Hey," he said softly, crouching beside her, not pushing. "You okay?" She blinked slowly and turned her head toward him. She opened her mouth like she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She just shook her head once barely. Keanu didn't ask again. He just sat beside her, letting the silence speak for them both. It wasn't awkward. It was full of something else, something real. Around them, the crew continued setting up. The director shouted something about lighting. Grips rolled a camera rig across the set. But none of that touched the space between Keanu and Ana. After a few minutes, she finally moved. Not much, just enough to lean her shoulder slightly into his. It was like a whisper saying, "I'm here, but I'm breaking." Keanu didn't move away. He just stayed, grounded, quiet, calm. It wasn't what he said that mattered. It was what he didn't. He understood her silence better than most people understood words. He remembered what it was like to carry pain in silence, to be surrounded by noise, but feel completely alone. He'd lived through losses, through moments, where all he wanted was someone to notice without asking questions. That's why he didn't push. That's why he didn't tell her everything would be fine. Instead, he just said gently, "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Ana closed her eyes. That was the moment she didn't know she needed. Because sometimes, when your heart is too loud to speak, the only person who can hear it is someone who's heard their own break in silence too. And in that quiet moment, echoes behind the curtained next day began just like the one before. The lights, the hustle, the fake cityscape of the film, said it, all moved around Ana like she wasn't really there. People smiled at her. Some asked if she was okay, but they didn't wait for an answer. No one really heard the silence she was drowning in, except Keanu. He watched her again from a distance, waiting for the right moment. Not out of pity, but out of understanding. There was a difference between helping someone to fix them and helping someone to let them feel safe. Ana was trying. She memorized her lines. She stood on her mark. She laughed at jokes even when they didn't land right. But behind the makeup and the lighting, something slipping a part of her that hadn't come back since yesterday. They had a scene together that morning. It was simple, just two characters sitting at a table, sharing a quiet conversation. But the cameras didn't roll right away. There was a delay with sound. The director was arguing with a producer about reshoots. People were stressed. Eyes were everywhere, but no one noticed Ana's hand shaking under the table except Keanu. He didn't speak, just reached under the table, his hand open. Palm up. Ana looked at him, and slowly, like she was trusting a ledge beneath her feet. She placed her hand in his. They didn't say a word, but for the first time in hours, Ana didn't feel like she was alone. When the cameras finally rolled, something unexpected happened. Ana's performance was raw, delicate, real. Her voice cracked in a line. That wasn't supposed to sound broken, but the director kept it. He liked it. Thought it was art. Only Keanu knew the truth. It wasn't art. It was her pain leaking through. After The scene ended. Anna walked off set quickly, straight to the back dressing area. She didn't want anyone to see her fall apart. But before she could close the door, Keanu was already there standing just outside. He didn't enter. He didn't ask. He just stood, silent, like a wall she could lean on, even if she never touched it. Inside, she sat down. She breathed, and for the first time in days she cried. Not loud, not wild, but soft, slow. The kind of cry that makes your chest feel smaller because you're finally letting go of something you've been holding in too long. When she finally stepped out, eyes still red, Keanu was waiting. He looked at her and said, "You don't have to pretend around me." Anna didn't know what to say, so she didn't. But this time her silence wasn't empty. It was full of gratitude. She nodded, and he nodded back. They walked to the break area together. She didn't speak. She didn't smile, but she sat beside him. She stayed, because when someone chooses to stay, when they show up without being asked, that's a kind of love the world doesn't notice. The weight she carried 3 days had passed since Anna let herself cry in that small dressing room. The storm inside her wasn't over, but something had shifted. It was like the air wasn't as heavy around her anymore. And the reason for that was simple. Keanu never left. He didn't hover, didn't overwhelm. He simply made space. And in that space, Anna began to breathe again. On set, people began noticing the difference in their scenes together. There was something deeper, something real, something that couldn't be faked. The director loved it, said the chemistry was raw and alive. But only Keanu and Anna knew it wasn't acting. Between takes, they sat together under the stage lights. Sometimes he'd share old stories from when he was just starting out his awkward auditions. Failed scenes and the moments that nearly broke him. He didn't do it to entertain. He did it to remind her that broken didn't mean useless. Anna listened, nodding silently, her eyes fixed on him. And when he spoke about lost, the kind you carry like a shadow, the kind that never leaves, she finally whispered her first full sentence since that day. "I lost my brother last month." Keanu didn't move. He just looked at her, gentle and open, like nothing in the world could pull his attention away. "He was only 27, she said, voice thin. "We talked every day. And now there's just silence." Her voice cracked. But this time, she didn't stop herself. She let it break. Keanu's reply was quiet. "I know that silence." And he did. His own history wasn't something he wore on his sleeve, but people who had seen real loss recognized it in each other. It lived behind the eyes, deep in the pauses between words. Anna looked down, tears brimming again. "I can't talk about it," she whispered. "Not even to my family. They expect me to smile. They think I'm strong. But I feel like I'm disappearing." Keanu didn't offer advice. He didn't tell her to be strong. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was a folded piece of paper, old and creased. He handed it to her without a word. She opened it. It was a quote written in simple handwriting. It read, "Grief is love with nowhere to go. So let it sit with you. And one day it will teach you how to love differently, not less." Anna held it in her hands like it was made of glass. "I carry that every day," Keanu said. "Not because it fixes anything, but because it reminds me. I'm still here." Anna nodded slowly, holding the paper tight. That night, when shooting wrapped, she didn't go home right away. Instead, she and Keanu sat outside the studio on an empty bench. The night was cold, but quiet, peaceful. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. But for the first time since her brother died, Anna whispered something to the sky. When silence began to delve, mornings on set had started to feel different. Anna no longer sat by herself. She still wasn't her usual bright self, but the empty distance in her eyes had faded. There was something warmer in the way she carried herself now, softer, more grounded. Keanu walked beside her each day, not as a protector, not as a savior, but simply as a friend who understood how to walk at her pace. He never rushed her, never filled the silence unless it truly needed words. The director noticed too. He pulled Keanu aside during lunch. "Whatever you're doing with Anna," he said, "don't stop. She's giving me something I've never seen before." Keanu just smiled and said, "She's giving it on her own. I'm just holding space." Meanwhile, Anna started doing something she hadn't done in weeks. She laughed. Not often, not loudly. But the sound was real, even if it only lasted a few seconds. One afternoon, between takes, she was sitting outside, flipping through her brother's old notebook. He had always been an artist, sketching everything: streets, strangers, stars. She smiled at a messy sketch of a guitar he once promised he'd learn to play. Keanu sat down beside her. "He sounds amazing," he said. "He was," she replied. "He used to say one day he'd draw something so beautiful that even the sadness would stop to look." Keanu thought for a moment, then asked, "Can I see one of his sketches?" She handed him the notebook. Keanu turned the pages slowly, quietly. When he stopped on one of a girl sitting by a lake, he looked up. "This one," he said. This is peace." Anna smiled. "A real one, not forced. He drew that the day after my birthday." She whispered, said it looked like me, only lighter. They sat in silence again, not out of sadness but out of respect, like the air between them had become sacred. Later that week, Keanu had a scene that required him to break down emotionally. The whole crew knew it was a tough one. The camera would stay close on his face. There'd be no music. Just raw performance. He stood there, under the lights. Waiting for the cue, Anna watched from behind the monitor, arms crossed, nervous for him. The director called, "Action." Keanu said his line, but then something happened. He paused. A real pause. Not written in the script. His eyes filled with emotion, not fake, not performed. And when he delivered the next few lines, there was a weight in his voice that made everyone on set hold their breath. Anna knew that look. It was the same look she wore the day her world changed. When the director yelled, "Cut," no one spoke. It was too quiet, too powerful. Anna walked over to him slowly. Her eyes locked on his. That wasn't acting, was it?" she asked softly. Keanu shook his head. "No, I just let it hurt." Anna touched his arm gently, the way someone does when they see a person's soul, not just their face. "Thank you," she said, "for letting it show." He looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly. "You showed me how." Night, Keanu left a small sketchbook on Anna's trailer doorstep. Inside was a simple drawing of a lake and a girl, peaceful, strong, and whole. On the last page he wrote, "Sometimes the silence doesn't need to be filled. It just needs to be heard." Anna didn't cry when she read it. She smiled, because for the between words and wonders, a final week of filming arrived faster than anyone expected. Scenes were wrapping. Props were packed into boxes, and the set that once felt like a second home was now starting to feel temporary, like a beautiful dream. Ready to end, Anna stood at the edge of the soundstage, watching the crew dismantle the fake living room where so many scenes had been shot. Everything looked smaller without the lights. Quieter, but not the kind of quiet she used to dread. This was different, calm, gentle, earned. She didn't say anything as Keanu walked up beside her. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" he said. She nodded, like something important happened here, something no one else will ever understand. "They'll see it in the film," Keanu replied, "but only we'll know the truth behind it." They shared a soft smile. Anna turned to him then. More serious, "I never thanked you." "You don't have to," he said immediately. "I do," she whispered. "Not just for staying, but for hearing what I couldn't say, for letting me fall apart and not trying to fix it." Keanu looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. "You didn't fall apart, Anna. You broke open and something stronger came out." Those words stayed with her all day. During her last scene, She delivered her lines with such clarity and emotion that the entire crew stood still, barely breathing.
Ow!
When the director called cut, he didn't need another take. He walked over, hugged her tightly, and said that was the best scene of the film. But it wasn't the words Anna spoke in that scene that mattered. It was everything she had lived through behind them. When she stepped off the set, Keanu was waiting with something in his hand. It was the same folded quote he had once given her, now pressed neatly between two clear frames. "For your home," he said, handing it to her, "or your heart, wherever it fits best." Anna took it, her hands trembling. She looked at the quote again. "Grief is love with nowhere to go." She looked up. "I think my love is starting to find a place now." Keanu nodded. Later that evening, the studio hosted a quiet rap party. People laughed, danced, shared stories. Anna stayed for a while, but eventually stepped outside, away from the noise. It was there, under the soft glow of the parking lot lights, that Keanu found her again. "Ready to leave?" He asked. "Almost," she said. "But I need to tell you something first." He waited. "I used to think silence meant weakness," she said. "But now, I think it's just love, waiting to be understood." Keanu's eyes softened. Then, "Your silence has been speaking volumes." They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. As they walked to their cars, Anna looked up at the sky. The stars were out, clear and still. She thought about her brother, the lake, the sketchbook, the notebook she carried, and the pain she had buried so deep. And then she whispered to the night, not out of sorrow, but out of strength, "I'm still here." Keanu looked over. "Yes, you are," he said. Voice in the quiet weeks passed since the final scene. The studio was silent now. The set had been broken down. Posters were being designed. Trailers were scheduled for release. The crew had all gone their separate ways, scattered across projects and cities. But something had stayed with Anna Peace. Not every day was easy. Grief still followed her like a soft echo, showing up in the quiet moments, early mornings, songs her brother used to play, the smell of his favorite cologne when she passed someone on the street. But it no longer crushed her. It no longer made her small. It reminded her of love Keanu had kept in touch, always with simple messages. Sometimes he sent a sketch, other times just a line of poetry or a photo of something beautiful. It wasn't about checking in, it was about staying present, staying real. One morning, Anna woke up to a message from the director. The studio had arranged a private screening of their film, just for the cast and crew. She smiled and texted back a single word: "Yes." The screening room was intimate. Dim lights. Velvet chairs. Whispers before the movie began. Anna walked in wearing a dark blue sweater, the one her brother had gifted her. In her hand was the framed quote Keanu had given her, tucked gently in her bag. Keanu was already inside. He stood when she entered. Their eyes met, and without a word, they embraced. When the movie began, Anna braced herself. But she didn't need to. What she saw on screen wasn't pain, it was transformation. Every scene they had done together, every pause, every moment of silence, it all had weight, power, emotion. Nothing was forced. Nothing was fake. And when that one scene played, the one where she barely whispered her lines, holding back tears, her voice shaking with vulnerability at the theater was completely still. You could hear the breath of every person in that room. Anna watched herself on screen and didn't flinch. She remembered how broken she had felt that day, how heavy the silence had been. But now, sitting there, she saw something else in her eyes. Strength. When the movie ended, the room erupted in applause. The director came over, eyes wet. "You gave us something real, Anna. Something that will stay with people." She nodded, thanking him softly. But it wasn't until the room cleared out, and it was just her and Keanu left, that the moment truly landed. They sat in the empty theater, the flicker of credits still rolling on the screen. "Did you see her?" "Ah!" Anna asked quietly, pointing to her on-screen reflection. "I didn't think she'd make it." "But she did," Keanu replied. "And she's even stronger now. Anna pulled the framed quote from her bag and placed it gently on the empty seat between them. "I want to give this back to you," she said, "'cause it carried me when I couldn't carry myself." Keanu shook his head. "Keep it. Maybe one day we'll pass it on to someone else who needs it." Anna looked at him, her eyes warm and steady. "I will." Then she leaned back in the seat, closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, felt full. Not perfect, not healed completely, but whole in a new way as they left the theater. Keanu walked beside her, quiet as ever. But just before they parted ways, Anna stopped. "Keanu," she said. He turned. "I never told you what helped me most," she said. "What's that?" he asked. "You didn't try to pull me out of the silence. You stepped inside it." He nodded slowly, his voice calm. "Because silence," he said, "is just another kind of language. Most people just never learn how to speak it." Anna smiled, and in that moment, nothing more needed to be said.